us a little bit about you. I know you're in Texas, so tell us about you.
Yeah, so I'm based in Texas. I am the oldest of three, and I am about 7 to 12 years older than my younger siblings. So growing up, I was the one in charge. I was the one that had to help my mom with the housework, helping raise my siblings. And
Mm.
my parents are also immigrants. So it was up to me to help them learn the language and translate for them. So I've always had this really heavy load on me. I think this started probably when I was about 4 years old. So I get the pressure of like, that
Mm.
perfectionism, feeling like you have to do everything or fix everything for a family.
Mm. So you're the oldest.
Mhm.
Do you only have sisters?
I have a brother and a sister.
Got you. Okay. And how do you think that that informed like your career path?
I always tell people that I've been a therapist since I was about 4 years old. And so it was just really easy and seamless. I was the person that my parents talked to about their issues, even though it wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
My friends always came to me. So it just felt very natural. And then when I started doing this work, I realized, oh, that wasn't healthy. Eso no era para mí. Like I was too little.
Yeah. Definitely. It resonates with me so much that you say that you've been kind of like in this role since you were young. And although for maybe a lot of us can identify with that, you're right. It was not appropriate. You should not have been in that role. And I
Yeah.
think I have a similar experience of, I remember growing up, my mom being very clear and direct
Mhm.
to others saying, Georgina está en casa, like I'm good because I have like my companion, my bestie, like almost like a little comadre with me.
Hmm.
And when I was little, that felt really good because it felt like my mom could rely on me and it felt like I could get that type of relationship with my mom. But then as I grew older, I realized this was never healthy and should have never happened. But of course, as kids of children of immigrants, we're figuring out like what is closeness and what is appropriate and what isn't. So I'll share a little bit about my experience similar to yours. I'm the oldest female in my family. So I have an older brother, then it's me, then it's my younger brother, my younger sister, and then my youngest brother.
Mm.
So, yeah, we are a big family. And I think that my older brother and I definitely had that role of, well, like the first little parents
Yeah.
after my parents. So we had a lot of say and we had a lot of control over the younger siblings. And that was good for my parents because they had help, but not good for us because it really made it so that we grew up super, super quick in our family of origin. So, um, tell me a little bit about, you said um, it did impact your decision making, but tell me about the work that you do and what you see come up in your sessions.
Yeah, so I work a lot with first gen individuals, other Latinos, and that recently I've seen a lot of people say like, the oldest daughter, the oldest child who was given that responsibility. And the way it's presenting itself now is with super self-critical statements, feeling like they have to be perfect, feeling like they're not a good enough son or daughter because they're not doing as much for their family. And part of it is because we're adults now, like we carry our own load, we can't continue to carry that other load for our parents and our family as well. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of anxiety.
Yeah. So the presentation for your adults is that of anxiety, that of stress, of
Hmm.
like almost like como le hago, like how do I do
Yeah.
both
Hmm.
in trying to balance my family of origins desires while also honoring who I am and what I want in my life.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Especially when you grow up in immigrant or bicultural families, there's this, sense of community growing up, right? Like todos en familia. And you grow up in the US where Western culture is all about individuality and doing your own thing. And it's really hard to kind of meld those two worlds together. You're not really taught how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a interesting, what feels like unique stress until we're growing up and we're realizing, oh wait, other people like us have similar experiences,
Mhm.
and I think that That's also what I see with my clients. It's sort of like, I like to call it, they have self-abandoned for so long that now that they have some sort of a voice, some sort of like maybe I like something different, or maybe I
Hmm.
want something different, and they start to use that voice, it's almost like, oh, like I didn't know that this could happen. I didn't know that I could have a different want or desire than my family. And I think what I see a lot with my clients is that guilt.
Yeah. It feels taboo. Like I can't possibly be putting myself first. That's selfish.
Yeah, and it's really maybe you have seen this also, a very long process to break that guilt that clients have in regards to figuring themselves out and figuring out what their likes or what their needs are. It's almost like you and I, we're the first step, or sometimes one of the first steps,
Hmm.
but it's one of the first steps to figure out like toxic like family patterns and a history that might take a really long time to process.
Yeah, I always tell my clients, you're the first link in the chain that's decided to break. You have nobody showing you the way. And that's why it feels so hard. And that's why others are looking at you with judgment, but knowing that like you're kind of setting the foundation for other generations, and that can be very healing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what I have heard has been a combination of great, that I'm the first and it feels really good, and that's terrifying.
Yeah,
What do you mean I'm the first? And what do you
yeah.
mean it's up to me to address this? It's truly something that it's a mixed bag. It kind of depends who comes into the room, into our therapy rooms for this topic. It can feel like empowering, and it can feel like terrifying, and like we don't know what to do with it. So I want to invite, I know we have some people here, invite you all to comment down below what your experience has been with parentification. I wonder, Laura, if you have any thoughts on, I like to say like common terms of
Hmm.
how we would label parentification in non-therapeutic terms. Is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Um, so my mom always called me her little ayudanta. So yeah, it was like, yeah, her little helper. So it was like a compliment, but also is she was labeling what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, this is your role. Be
Hmm.
mom's helper and be attentive. Like, ¿qué
Hmm.
necesita mamá? Or ¿qué se
Hmm.
tiene que hacer? Yeah, so ayudanta is a good one. The one that I thought of was also just in like common terms, like just growing up too fast. Like
Yeah,
the experience of when you were supposed to be playing, when you were supposed to be learning things, kind of like in the same way that your younger siblings were learning things, you had different expectations, or people had different expectations for you of, you're the oldest or you're bigger and you have to like show your younger siblings. So although it's a typical experience for all of us to be children and to not have mastered all of our goals or all of our milestones. Although that's typical and normal, we as older siblings sometimes are not given that grace or that opportunity to fall and to figure it out and to stumble.
yeah. You mentioned being, the example, like that role model for your younger siblings and being very robbed of your childhood. Like I couldn't do all the normal things that, teenagers my age could do because I had a toddler that I had to take everywhere. So
Yeah.
definitely the feeling of being robbed of what was developmentally appropriate.
Yeah. And with that, I think that the experience of eventually like having anger,
Hmm.
I think for me and for a lot of people, the anger comes in adolescence. So
Hmm.
when it is natural to kind of have independence, or when it is natural to have our own voice, and being angry that our situation is one where we have to caretake and where we have to slow down, and be there for others when we just want to be teenagers and we just want to, even saying it, like we just want, like it's normal
Just want
thing.
to be a normal girl. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's really what made it difficult between my mom and I was that I was angry at her for not letting me just be like all the other girls that I was growing up around. And so our relationship was really strained from then on out. It's taken a long time to
Yeah.
get to the point of like, okay, we can have a relationship now. I understand. Or, I'm making room for both. But I noticed that a lot, that resentment and that anger that makes it really hard to connect to your family.
Yeah. I know, and I'm glad that we both are saying that because there's this assumption that somehow as therapists we're just positive light and energy,
Mhm.
and it's just like, no. Like we're human, and
Yes.
there is that reality of our own histories impact us, and we have our own stuff that we work through. So
Mhm.
you're mentioning for you some anger, similar for me, resentment.
Mhm.
Uh, I think even having anger and resentment is a guilt inducing thing. Um, if we think about it, there's so many like people like our parents who would say, "That's my mother," and like I don't, we don't go there with the
You only
emotions.
get one. I hear that a lot. You only get one.
Sí. Nada más una madre tienes en esta vida. That's so
Hmm.
true. But it's this message of you just have to accept it.
I hear a lot of also like, but my parents sacrificed so much, right? Or they did so much for me that it feels wrong to be angry at them for some of the unhealthy patterns. And so again, like kind of making room for both of those. Both can be true.
You know, it's interesting that you say that, like, del sacrificio y de todo lo que hacen nuestros padres. And there's trends here on
Hmm.
TikTok and on social media, like, graduations and like everything that my parents went through to get me here or to have me accomplish this. And it's just like, yeah, I hear it,
Hmm.
and you want to acknowledge your parents. And at the same time, it's sort of like, wait,
It's your role. Like you signed up for this.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
Um, what do you mean by that? I want to know what you mean.
So again, I hear that a lot. I hear it from my own parents sometimes. Después de todo lo que hicimos y todo lo que hacemos por ti, and I have to be like, you're my parent. You signed up for that, right? It's not like a added to your parenting duties. And so, although yes, I would love to honor and respect you and show you my gratitude, it's not a given because of what you did, right? Like what you did was what you signed up for.
Yes. And what you signed up for, parents, in part was immigrating. Like I was born here in the States. What you signed up for was having children here in the States,
Hmm.
or traveling to the United States. And in part that was a yes, a sacrifice to be away from your family, but it was also gain, or there was another reason for it. Your future children were not the only reason for
Right.
having made that sacrifice. But what ends up happening is that there's this, because it's technically true they did immigrate, and that did happen. Because it's technically true, it can be kind of like a way to have that looming like
Hmm.
over the children's head of, well, look at what I do for you and look at the sacrifices that I made for you.
Yeah.
And to be very honest, those types of comments I have heard as early as like 5 years old, like parents towards their children.
Yeah.
And children are just like, what do you
Okay,
mean?
like it makes sense when you're a child. I remember hearing that from my mom when I would communicate that I felt lonely because I was left home alone a lot, or that I wanted to do these other things. It was like, oh, I have to work so that I can feed you and clothe you and provide a roof over your head. And now as an adult, I'm like, those are human basic needs that, yeah, needed to be provided for me. And so the fact that they were used as guilt trip, that part is what hurts me now as an adult, or that sometimes I get angry about, like, wait, that's not cool.
No, and Um, Although, and that's the thing about it, and this is like a piece that I can like go on and on about, is
Hmm.
is that okay? I understand now as an adult that that can be true, and little me, my needs can also be true.
Yeah.
So although you still have to go to work, mom and dad, there's a way to speak to a child and to say, you want me to play with you? You want
Hmm.
me to spend more time with you, hija? And maybe no me podían llevar a Disneyland, no me podían ciertas cosas, right? Like
Right.
we can't do certain things, but quieres que juegue contigo, que quieres jugar. Vamos a jugar las escondiditas. Vete tú
Yeah.
para allá, yo para acá. And even though, yes, they could not meet the maybe the immediate like desire that I had in that moment, they could still meet my want and my desire to connect with them.
Yeah.
And that's the piece that like pisses me off, Laura.
You're like, that was so like you could have just sat and watched TV with me. Yeah, I totally and I talk about this with my mom now and her face just falls and she's like, I didn't know. And at times I understand that, but others I'm like, we didn't know that a child has emotional needs. That can be really hard. Like this feeling of like it's not fair. Why why couldn't you know?
Yeah, to feel that sense of, did you not know? Did you? Or is it this way of speaking to yourself about, well, uno no sabía, uno eran otros tiempos, and like, just kind of like still dismissing us, still creating a narrative in which you don't need to know that children play in order to play with the child.
Right.
You don't need to be a developmental specialist to know
Right.
that.
Yeah, that this is
Because
a
kids
need.
te buscan con tus ojitos. I have a 3-year-old at home. Te buscan con sus ojitos, and they're just like, come on, like, come play with me.
Hmm.
Until, and this is something that I've seen a lot with my clients, they don't try anymore until kids either grow or have an understanding that work is more important to my parents, or whatever it is, stress or whatever other situations. But
Hmm.
I do think that you're hitting something that's really important, which is, um, although you didn't know, you could have learned, or you could have sat with me to learn. I didn't expect you to be perfect, mom and dad. That's not what
Right.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about giving me the time of day, giving me, being interested in me as a child.
Yeah. And even now, like just all you have to do is sit and hear and validate my experience. And it, for a lot of parents, and I get it, like culturally, they get so defensive and they have to tell you why things were that way. And
Sí, sí.
that's been kind of something that I've worked with my mom about to let her know, like, I don't need you to explain. I just need you to listen and validate the fact that that was hard for me. And like now we're moving past it.
And that's the part that's hard for our parents. For a lot of Latino parents, they really struggle with um, their teens, their adults, their children telling them something about their experience and honoring it.
Mhm.
Just honoring that that was their experience, and saying, wow, ¿te acuerdas de eso?
Yeah.
And sitting in that discomfort of, y te dolió, hija.
Yeah. That's hard.
And then sitting again further in that discomfort and saying, to a certain extent, lo siento, I'm sorry, hija, that I
Hmm.
couldn't, or I didn't. I wasn't there in the way you wanted me to be there.
Yeah.
And I can't play with you porque ya no eres niña, so no va a ser la misma cosa.
Right. And again, I think it's something that isn't taught. Like it's there's the hustle culture is so ingrained, the fix it, that when they hear these things, they feel the need to then fix it or again excuse
Sí.
it. Like sitting with emotions, what is that? That doesn't pay the bills, that doesn't feed me. We don't need that.
Yeah, it's difficult for a lot of our parents to sit in that and to not do anything with it besides listen and validate. But I think it's you and I and our community are wanting different, and hopefully there is a
Yeah.
difference in our community. I was reading here some of the comments that I did the best I could. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
but it still hurt, user says.
Yeah.
And then, or when my mom says, I'm lying when I say she didn't pay attention to me.
Mm.
I've heard that too. And
Yeah.
also, eso no pasó. Sí,
I hear
mamá,
that all the time.
instinto. Tú me aventabas.
Hmm.
Por eso nosotros era like botellas de suavitel. Like that happened. And we're like
Yes.
laughing or something about it. And she's like, eso no pasó.
What? Ah, no exageres. I hear that from my mom a lot. No exageres. I'm like, why would I want to exaggerate my own trauma? Like, if anything, I would want it to not be present.
Just period. Yeah. For
Yeah.
it to not have happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for this statement that I did the best I could, I want to say that uh, because for different reasons, we can validate and experience this sense of our parents were probably traumatized, our parents probably had, and at the same time still have expectations of them. And I don't think that our parents beating us, our parents calling us names, our parents putting us down is the best.
Right.
I don't
Kind of
think
holding them accountable.
like let's acknowledge, let's accept that some parents came to be parents because and it happened, and that once they had them, they were overwhelmed, they were triggered, they kept having children. It's sort of like this combination, and the need was there. So they're, I don't know that I could call that their best.
For me, it's like, again, holding them accountable for what was definitely not acceptable, but also recognizing that it wasn't all bad. Yes, there were some good things. I was still provided support, but we can still kind of communicate like that was not okay. And it's not going to be okay with me and my kids. Like letting them know like we don't continue this.
No. And that's where I see a lot of the patterns kind of begin to come up is when the children have children. And
Hmm.
then the expectation is, oh, I get to call them names, or I get to say certain things, or I get to give them the thing that mom is not agreeing to. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. You
Yeah,
don't get access then. And then there's these limits and there's these boundaries that we may place as adults now of, okay, you won't be the primary caregiver or you won't, whatever it is. And then somehow hay ofensa and like
right.
nos entendemos. And
Yeah,
then
setting those internal boundaries are like, excuse me.
yo soy
Like,
la abuela.
hmm.
O yo soy tu madre. Yo sé, like I know best. And
Hmm.
it's just like, okay, but keep believing that that's okay. But I still now have a responsibility to protect. I have a responsibility to not just protect physically my daughter, but also emotionally to make sure that,
Yeah,
no que I'm gonna shield her from everything. Life is life, and I understand that. But that there is this reality that I'm not gonna just expose her just because to harm or to statements that are not necessary.
right.
So I wanted to make sure to address that one. And then breaking the silence is so difficult because their parents are so stuck in their beliefs. Anything about that, the stuckness, Laura, that we see with our parents?
That's probably one of the biggest complaints I hear when I start talking to my clients about boundaries is that like, but they won't understand. They're stuck in their ways. They're never going to follow along. And so kind of the education piece of boundaries can be internal boundaries. We don't have to explain to them what they need to do from now on, especially if you think they're not going to be receptive. But like what boundaries you put on yourself to limit that harm, right? To reduce the amount of pain that you go through in these interactions. And that can be eye-opening for people because they think boundaries are just telling somebody what to do or not to do.
Ya no me vas a hablar así, or no vas a
Hmm.
like scream at me or hit me or something like that. But in reality, it's more so I'm not safe in that environment where I could be screamed at or I have been screamed at still as an adult. And I'm not going to put myself in that environment
Right.
either ever or as frequent as I used to, type of thing. And keeping in mind that once they do separate, what ends up happening? They start to feel better.
Yeah. But also, so like, I feel like because we're trying to heal, and I see this in my clients, there is this want to like educate because you've already taken that role for so much of your life of like, teaching your parents what's right and what's not, that's where it gets tricky. Like, it's not our job to educate them on how to be better parents for us anymore. It's our job to be better for ourselves and kind of treat ourselves the way we wanted to be treated then.
Yeah, and you're referring to like that reparenting aspect
Yeah.
of, I won't speak negatively to myself. I won't be
Mhm.
unkind to my body about these certain things or put my body down or, you know, we hear that a lot, like really negative
Yeah.
talk and those types of things. So it's creating a different a narrative, an internal monologue about, oh, that was really hard for you, and it feels sad that you don't get you're deciding not to see mom and dad that
Mhm.
frequent, but it isn't safe,
Right.
and we're deciding and we're creating safety for our chosen family or for our family now.
Mhm.
Yeah. I will say to Esmeralda regarding the stuck, when you say it's so difficult because our parents are so stuck in their heads, something that I like to tell my clients is that trauma creates a loop. Um, so for unresolved trauma for our parents, they will kind of speak in circles. They will, pero cuando yo estaba chiquita, and you won't imagine what I had to suffer through. When we're talking about our experience in that moment, that is their mind and their trauma kind of conversation, trying to take over and trying to, in a way, like make it about themselves. And they can't kind of help it. So the only thing that we do is we set the boundary and we kind of say, yeah, mom, I think it's time that you look for help. And I think it's
Mhm.
time that, if you need help, I'll help. But if not, I'm sorry. And this is kind of like, this is a lot because I'm talking to you about me or this other thing right now. And you're talking to me about lo que sufriste en tu niñez. And I think it's time that you get some support for that. And our parents se van a ofender y se van a esto y se van a lo
Yes.
otro.
Yo no estoy loca. I hear
Yeah.
that from my mom.
Yeah, and that's okay, but you can have support should you wish to take it. And I think, Laura, for me, once I went there,
Hmm.
I could give myself permission to no longer be my mom's therapist.
Yeah.
When I said, Mom, I know the best therapist. I know, like, y unas que toman tu aseguranza, y unas que, like, I was just like hyping it up, and I was just like, you can get support, and you can this, and you can that. And ay, ¿para qué? Ay, no. Ay, esto, ay, lo otro. And I was just like, and once I did that enough times, when I recommended and suggested and kind of
Hmm.
gave this feedback, I said, like,
It's
like,
not my
I
job anymore.
cannot, I cannot, because the reality is, yes, I'm a therapist, but I'm not her therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had to voice that to my mom. So I would do the same thing of like, that's not okay that that happened to you, and there's help for you, and here are the resources because you have the availability to, use these tools as much as I do. And she said, I don't need a therapist. You're my therapist. And I'd be like, Mama, no, like, I don't need to know that much about you. I'm your daughter. I'm not your therapist.
And my dad and my, like, no,
Yeah, I don't
no,
need to
no.
know. So, like, just hearing her say that that was her expectation, I was like, oh, okay, no, like, I don't need to be doing this anymore. So, even like now, when she tries to share very personal things about her relationship with my dad or, what she's struggling with, I do kind of have to be like, Mom, it sounds like you need to talk to somebody. Like, that's the way I kind of let her know, I don't need to know this and I can't carry this for you.
No. And the more that we do it, especially as therapists, there is that bit of like, maybe like, pues, ¿para qué fuiste a la escuela? Or like,
Hmm.
si ni a tu propia madre quieres ayudar.
Yes.
The guilt trip of
Yeah.
it. And eventually it's sort of like, Oh, no, but I have offered, and I have offered to link you and to support you. And at the moment, you haven't wanted to take it. So it's okay, mom. Like, keep doing the things that are helpful to you. For my mom, it's church. For my
Mhm.
mom, it's also like YouTube channels and different things. And I'm just like, okay, ahí tienes tu apoyo que quieres aceptar. Lo otro no quieres.
Yeah.
I respect it. I kind of like am stepping back from oversharing or like over recommending also. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring that up because that's something that is really helpful to clients to learn is like support doesn't have to be you. Like you are not
No.
the only source of support. You supporting your parents can be connecting them to other resources. It can
Yes.
be, sending them referrals. It doesn't have to be immediately you stepping in and taking care of the problem. And sometimes it's like, okay, like that takes the weight off.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you say that. Like, I don't think I had heard you, or maybe in one of your videos, like say that. Like, support doesn't have to be you.
Yeah.
And then we kind of like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah.
I'm her daughter, but she relies on me, but she thinks of me as her therapist or her bestie or her. And it's just like, support doesn't have to be me.
Yeah, no.
And it's
Support
okay.
comes in lots of forms and kind of learning how to delegate.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And then Marisela was saying that she does have that guilt. I was hearing others here also. And feel free to share. I don't know if sometimes, Laura, we get different messages. So if you don't see
Hmm.
some of these, feel free to also. To them, it was a normal Tuesday, but to me, it's years of therapy. Yeah, just
Yeah.
another day, just another kind of experience. You're talking about, I don't know what this person's name is. I follow someone on Instagram. His name is Patrick Tehan. It's a white therapist, but he does a wonderful job addressing toxic families. And he talks about that. Like, for them, it was a Thursday, just like whatever. And for me,
Right.
it was just like the abuse and the difficulties that I endured were so painful and so difficult.
Hmm.
So thank you for sharing that. And then the difference between us and our parents is we see our children as little humans, and they see us as their property. Any comments on that, Laura?
So I've done a lot of like my own soul searching on that topic because my parents were treated as property, as laborers, right? They were just another piece of the cog that helped provide for the family. And so even in the things that they would expect of us to reply to them, like when they would ask us for something, it wasn't, yes, it was mande usted, like how can I serve you? It's
Mande usted,
just
mamá.
yes, it was so ingrained in the culture that yeah, that there's this hierarchy of like I'm the boss. I would always hear a lot like whenever I ask questions or, rezongona, it was ¿Cuándo has visto que los patos le tiran a las escopetas? Like there was this, idea that you're not allowed to tell me anything. You're not allowed to question anything.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that you say that. Like, for us, it was like, se te va, se te va a secar la mano or something like that.
Yeah.
Si le levantas la mano a tu padre, si, like, you need to know your place and know that although I can beat you and I can educarte, yo te puedo
Hmm.
educar, yo te puedo enseñar, but God forbid a child ever be human and have a reaction
Yeah.
and want to defend themselves, either that is a child, teenager, adult, and it's sort of like se te va a sacar la mano, o a tu madre, a tu padre, nunca. And I'm just like, don't we have basic rights? Is there not a opportunity here for you to reflect on how twisted and how difficult this is? But you're right, you're highlighting the culture and how normalized it is.
Hmm.
And I think, en tiempos de antes sí tenían bastantes hijos y sí
Hmm.
era el propósito,
Yeah.
more hands to work. Truly, like my dad, I think, started working at 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah. And so it's just like they just see it as the thing, right? Like, okay, my child is beneath me and they serve me and they're to be seen and not heard. And really, no, we have choice. Like you said, we have rights.
Yeah. And I think that's a difficulty because in on one hand there is that belief culturally, and then on the other hand, mira todos los sacrificios que hicimos por ti, which is
Mhm.
doesn't go in hand with that. It's a little different. It's a we chose to have you, we wanted you, and we sacrificed all of this for you, and it's just like, wait a minute, am I property, or
Yeah.
did you want a family, and did you want to have communication with your children and respect with for your children and with your children, that kind of like both ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it's so ingrained, I see that's why people and parents get so stuck is they've never questioned it. They've never been around others that question it. So when you're the first one and the only one questioning it, that's where the defensiveness comes in. It's like, what are you talking about? No, this is not how we do things.
¿Y quién
Because,
eres tú?
mhm,
¿Y quién crees que eres tú para,
mhm,
to come and question this?
yeah.
I feel like I'm like channeling all of the things that I have heard growing up, and I'm just like, oh, yep, that definitely was my experience also. And then Denise was saying, breaking generational cycles, currently going through this, and it's very lonely and a lot of grief. And I think, Laura, you were mentioning grief
Mhm.
in your clients and your experience working with first gen parentified children.
Yeah, I always tell my clients to make space and to grieve the childhood they wish they would have had, or the childhood that they had a right to, right? Like even the simplicity of being spoken to in a gentle manner or being told nice things, like being able to sit with the sadness of that, like that was really sad because you deserve that. We all deserve that. It's an inherent human need to feel loved and to feel accepted. Um, and once you do that, to then build your community that is going to provide you with that support, like because it can feel so lonely. So find amigas, right? Siblings that are going through the same thing. Like, who can you talk to about this so that it doesn't feel so lonely? Therapy.
Yeah, especially with a therapist who understands and who you don't have to over explain to. I
Hmm.
think that, and you have probably seen this, Laura, with your clients, it's sort of like this relief for our clients when they're just like, I don't know, they say something in Spanish or they are bilingual and they just Spanglish our session or whatever. And
Hmm.
then it's just like, yeah,
We get it.
yeah. Unfortunately, we do.
Right. Or even just like the simple matter of, although sometimes we do have to cut off our parents and go no contact, that sometimes isn't the option culturally. And so our clients knowing that like we're not just going to suggest that you stop talking to your mom if
No,
that's not what's good for you or
no.
that's not, culturally appropriate.
Yeah, I think that there's some gradual kind of like conversations about boundaries. And to be very honest, there are clients who I see for a year, for 2 years, who at a certain point I do say, look, you still get to do what you want and what feels right for you. But from what I hear as your therapist, as someone who feels protective over you, like, I don't know that this is a, and I'm just very clear and honest with them. Like, this is a really unsafe relationship. This is
Mhm.
a relationship where you are not respected. And I would say that about a partner, I would say that about a parent, I would say that about a sibling, where I am addressing like my concern for them. And I'm just like, at the end of the day, this is your choice, this is your decision. But I have these concerns for you as your therapist, I tell them. I'm like,
Right.
oh, like this parent really keeps crossing your boundaries and being unsafe. And although it's not the original, like I would never say that very early on in treatment. Once
Hmm.
I've known them for a long time, I do say, like, this is one of those cases where no one would be upset at you for setting your boundaries and keeping the distance, because it is that unsafe and that it is that invalidating, like
Hmm.
the experience with their parents. But yeah, I've heard other white therapists specifically address, oh, well, you could just not talk to your mom, or you could just, and I'm just like, it's the
Yeah.
first session. Like, you
It's the
don't know.
first session, and there's no consideration to like who else is tied to that, right? Because it's usually not just mom, it's like mom,
Yeah.
dad, and the rest of the family. Like it comes with a package.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a lot to consider about what that would mean.
Hmm.
Yeah. I think, let's see here. In regards to the grief, I will share that a way that I like to explain it to my clients is that sometimes we are grieving people who are still around. Sometimes it can feel like the relationship that we wish we had,
Hmm.
and I think that's where the guilt comes in because one day our parents are going to pass, and clients think about that and they think about that reality, and they withhold their own desires, their own wishes in order to continue the relationship.
Hmm.
Uh, but the reality is that although we only have one parent, one mom, one dad, that they also only have one of us. And that getting to know you is also an important part of that relationship. It's not just sí señora, no señor, like just like the superficial relationship where but I just respected them and I left it at that, and I never took up space or time or energy from them. It's just I do what they say and that's it. Now,
Yeah.
some people still do that. I mean, maybe our parents still do that with their parents if they still have them around, but it's definitely something that I have seen a lot. But usually it is that grief of like knowing and wishing for something different, and
Hmm.
maybe knowing like we may not have that in this life.
Yeah, I recently saw my mom kind of come to that realization and go through that. We were sharing something about what her mom, my grandmother, had said, and she goes, "Es que tu abuelita no sabe decir cosas bonitas." Like she couldn't be nice to us, and she was realizing that like my mom can't do that, and it's sad because I wish she could.
Yeah, that duality of like maybe I love my mom and I want my mom,
Hmm.
but no sabe y no lo hace. No. En veces pienso like son frías o son como like distantes, and it's just like I'm not a stranger. I'm your child.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Esmeralda here was saying, my mom gives my sisters and I the guilt trip of us not calling her. I did tell her that um, she also has to make and show an effort as a parent. She can reach out to us. But
Hmm.
what I get is she feels and thinks it's only our responsibility. Yeah, it's that
I see
one-sidedness.
that a lot. Yeah, this feeling of like me abandonaste because it is this role that we're given of like you now check on me, you care for me. This is how you show me you love me.
Yeah, but
And she's right. Like it goes it goes both ways.
it's sad because I've heard it in children.
Hmm.
Like a parent talk to another parent or a family member about their young child. Well, the phone works to a 9-year old.
Wow.
Pues él no me llama a mí. And
Hmm.
it's like this reality of maybe parental separation or maybe, changes in the family. But this piece of like, no, up at least until 18, like it's still your responsibility.
Yeah,
Like maybe, yeah, después you maybe feel a little bit more like I already raised them or I can kind of separate a little bit. But this is a child
right.
who you don't know if he's eaten. You don't know if, like he has clothes. You don't know the basics about him. And you're still sitting there like, well, the phone works both ways.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate because then like, she said there's this guilt associated with that. Like you're the bad guy for putting the responsibility on them.
Yeah. Yeah, for calling it out and for saying, no, mom, you can call me.
Hmm.
Yeah. I will say one of the things that my older brother is really good at, which is different than is that he will call it out in such a way, like, let's say my dad were to say that, pues, mis hijos no me llaman, or, um, and it's our duty to kind of call him or something like that. My older brother has a way of being like, I like you miss me.
Uh-huh.
I could tell you're missing me. You could have just called me or something.
Yeah.
So it's this like twist to something that is like unreasonable.
Hmm.
Let's be honest, because you could have just called me if you wanted to
Yeah.
talk to me. And it's this twist of like, pero otra vez llámeme pues, si en verdad me quiere hablar. No, but it's your duty and it's your responsibility. But then I think in seeing my older brother not take it so seriously and not feel so guilty, it has given me permission to be like let it slide. If my dad's being petty, let it slide. If whatever comments, let it slide. Because the
Yeah,
reality is, if mom, dad would have wanted to call us, call me. Send me a
right.
little text. I don't know. Mándame un Facebook. I don't know, little thing.
Yeah, my sister is the one that is able to do that in my family. Like the way she talks to my mom, sometimes I'm like, I could never. She'll be
Yes,
like,
yes, yes.
María, así no se le habla a la gente, or she'll call her out. And so seeing her just be so confident in that, it kind
Yes.
of gives me permission to be like, no, we don't do that anymore. Like we're working towards better.
So you're saying your sister calls out your mom?
Yeah, she does. Yep.
Oh, my brother too. And it's one of those things where it's just kind of like, oh my goodness. Like, is my dad gonna freak out? Is he
Yep.
gonna like not like it?
Right.
Because usually that is the case. My dad will kind of be the type to be like, I'm just a clown to you guys. You guys don't respect me. And I'm like, it was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to
Yeah.
be that serious, then we're gonna be silly about it and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could have just called or you could have just whatever.
Right.
Um, so they were also another pair who keeps trauma dumping on my sister, on me and my sister, but refuses therapy. Yeah, eventually just saying, you know, mom, there are these places and it's okay if you get support. And if all you want to do is vent to your therapist, that is a place for it for a whole hour, like kind of hyping it up.
Yeah. I've had clients who have parents that do that and they feel like they say that so often and it keeps happening that
Yeah.
eventually what we have to do is learn like how to walk away from the situation of like, oh, mommy, I have to go. I'm busy, or I'll call you later. Like just kind of being the person that cuts it rather than again getting to the here's your
Yeah.
support.
And having that exit plan. Like
Hmm.
I'm here for X amount of time, or I am gonna be on the phone, and then I'm gonna, my water's boiling, and I have to get,
Hmm.
put the stuff. I don't know.
Safety planning.
Yes, and preparing for that. And then with the holidays here, Esmeralda was saying, it's so difficult to keep living and looking past things.
Mm.
Yeah, especially when it's a time that like it's family or we're supposed to, feel warm and connected. And the reality is there are times when we can't continue to look past things and we can't continue to ignore the comments or the things that are said. And someone was saying it's like, my mom. Si las conocemos a las señoras because we see it, right? Like,
Yeah. They must have
any,
meetings where they come up with these ideas or sayings to tell us.
no, but I mean, that's an interesting thing. How do you think that it is that culturally we're having a similar conversation? I don't know where your parents are from, Laura.
My parents are from Zacatecas,
No
and
way.
yeah,
Mine too. Where?
they're from this town called Nochistlán. It's like
Okay.
towards the border of Aguascalientes.
Okay.
Um, but and I'm an observer, like I'm neurodivergent, so I grew up just observing everything. And what I know now from recollection is our moms and our tias would sit together and talk about this experience of being a mom, and they'd give each other pointers. And this is what they would tell each other. Like, this is how they hype themselves up with, well, did you tell him this or did you do this? And, es que ese niño necesita unas nalgadas. And like, that's what they grew up hearing. That's what they then told themselves. So it is very much just ingrained in like what was culturally acceptable to tell one another.
Yeah, I do think that that is a part of it. Like las pláticas y las
Hmm.
conversaciones que tienen. Of course, that's still part of our culture and like the beliefs, like la chancla y
Hmm.
dale un chanclazo y se acomoda or whatever.
Right.
I do think that it's more complex, but I do think that religion has a big part in this. Most are, especially for both of us, we probably grew up Catholic. My
Hmm.
parents from Zacatecas also. And they definitely grew up with a lot of guilt within the church
Yes.
and guilt for I don't know there's a complexity because I do think that there has there's a lot of oppression in our communities, and there's a lot of acceptance of that oppression. So like
Yeah. One of
beating,
my comments, Marianismo, it's, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
just the idea that, like, parents are up here, mom is very like serving and virginal, right, for the family, and the kids are just there to be seen and not heard.
Yes. And interestingly, I feel like lots of people don't know what Marianismo is. So, can you share with us your understanding of Marianismo?
So, what I understand of Marianismo is those roles that women take, right? The woman is usually very self-sacrificial, and everything she does is for her family and for her partner. And there are a lot of taboos, like you don't speak up for yourself. It's you put yourself at the end of the list of who you take care of. And it goes kind of hand in hand with machismo, right? So like the man is seen as, the authority figure of the house, and he takes care of major decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
so, especially growing up like as a daughter, you are instilled these kind of like roles, like this is what you're going to be when you grow up.
Yes. And I think I like that you're highlighting that it's this other side of machismo, because I think that it is a way that women are taught to uphold the man. So like women are taught like yes that we should be seen as pure and all of those things, but also that we should preserve our virginity for a man and
Right.
and that there is no pleasure for women, that it is all for the purpose of our family, for the
Mhm.
purpose of keeping together the family and making sure that the family is okay.
Right.
So definitely I think that a lot of these topics stem from the the way that our countries of origin have been impacted, and the way that our parents, maybe us ourselves also, continue to accept some of those things as truth,
Yeah.
as well, my role, even though I went to school and even though, is to be a wife only, or to be a mother and to have as many children as God will give me, and to, that would be kind of the way that my mom has taught me.
Yeah, even like the basic self-care needs that you're taught growing up of like cooking and cleaning for yourself is followed by because one day you're going to be married and your husband's going to expect this of you. Not this is just something you should know to do for yourself.
Yeah, life skill that you eat and you should know.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that boys are not expected to have that
Right.
necessarily, especially in our families, that we are trained desde chiquitas to be serviciales and all of those things,
Hmm.
and men not so much.
Right.
Yeah, or our brothers. Uh, so here I have, so they were saying it's like, my mom, and the reason I feel guilty is because I used to make my older daughter to help with my youngest. Yeah, it can be hard, especially if we grabbed some of those beliefs, Marisela, as our own. I think that the guilt that you experience with your children can be remedied or repaired by addressing some of that. Like when you were younger, to your oldest daughter, when you were younger, mom used to have you help and have expectations for you, and you were a child, and that wasn't okay. But it takes a certain amount of like courage to have those conversations with our children, and to acknowledge something that we know our children experienced, and that they just need their adult to validate and to honor for them. So be courageous. Talk to your children about the things that you know have happened, even if you think that ya no les impacta, ya no esto, uh,
Yeah.
because it could still be impacting your relationship if you still feel guilty about the role you gave your oldest daughter. Yeah, and Mari was saying, grieve the mother you will never have. It's so
Yeah.
hard. I think
Yeah.
that I think that once I allowed myself to grieve that for myself, I was able to acknowledge the mother I did have.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
when I fully was in my grief was probably when my maternal grandmother passed away. So her mom, my mom's mom.
Hmm.
And um, it's making me emotional, but I think my experience was that when my abuelita Jovita passed, that I also lost my mom.
Mm.
It felt like such a weight that my mom no longer had her mom, that it's almost like my mom like became religious and like she kind of disappeared from who we knew her as. She was like this funny and like silly y se llevaba, and like that was who my mom was. And then it changed, and she found solace and like like that experience of um, relief in religion. But it felt like a loss for me. It felt, I mean, I was 18, I was already an adult, but I still needed my mom. I was a young
Yeah.
adult, and I still needed her guidance, her, in a way, amistad, or her kind of like, ¿y qué hiciste? Y platícame qué compraste, and those types of things that we used to do. And that
Right.
changed. And that changed. But once I think I was doing EMDR therapy, I don't know if you're trained or if you, yeah.
So I've been trained. I don't use it too often. I want to do the
Okay.
training again, but yeah, it can be life-changing.
Yeah, once I was doing EMDR therapy, that's when it shifted for me, because I was like almost like continuing to grieve that loss, my grandma's and my mom's. And then I was just like, oh, my mom is still around. It's just different now.
Yeah.
And I could see the things that she still had for us, and the ways that she still showed up for us. And then I could accept that. But no longer expecting it to be that old relationship that we used to have, where
Yeah.
when my grandma was still around. Yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of what was change life-changing for me was going through therapy, doing EMDR, and really accepting like all of this anger I was holding on to was the expectation of the mom that I wanted rather than looking at the mom that I did finally have. Because although it was very painful growing up and she did a lot of really unhealthy things, that wasn't her anymore. And because I was so mad at her, I didn't allow myself to see that.
Yeah, like and that's what trauma like does to us. It keeps us in this place of this is it, and this is the story, and this is what happened, and we're almost like not catching up
Hmm.
to the differences or the thing that we have in front of us. So it sounds like you processed it and you were
Yeah.
able to kind of like come to and be like, oh, this is my reality now.
Hmm.
Yeah. And Adriana from Latinx Therapy had said such an important topic. Thank you, chicas, for validating boundaries. And Esmeralda was saying it's a two-way road. Maricela, that's how my dad is towards my older brother. And my older brother's a grown man. He doesn't call.
Mm.
Yeah. And she's the youngest. She says I do too, and I'm the youngest. Yeah, we call it que es sumisa, nuestra maybe nuestras mamás or
Hmm.
yeah. I think Marianismo is just a general term, and then within our families we can definitely have different ways of um, kind of identifying how we would see our family members, especially our moms, like almost
Yeah.
like calladas, or like go with the flow, like not really having an opinion, or yeah, yeah. I wonder for you, Laura, is there any other comments that you have on your side, or any other thing that you would like to address? Because we're about at the hour.
I think we went through a lot. Boundaries, grieving, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
working through trauma.
Yeah, it's very heavy, but it is possible to resolve these things. I think the biggest piece, as you had said earlier, is like building community,
Mhm.
knowing that although your experience felt like you were alone, it's sort of like once you start talking to other people, you're like, do we have the same mom, or like what?
Mhm.
Because this is so similar. This is so um, in line with like what our experience was. Even you and I, que no nos conocíamos, I'm just
Yeah.
like, that sounds super similar.
Hmm.
And it probably also sounds similar because our parents are from the same place.
Right, the same area.
Yeah. I think for me, my biggest resource has been my siblings. I think sorry, it's asking me to verify something here. um, our experience growing up. So I will have the most similarities with my siblings who grew up with me. And
Hmm.
although my younger siblings have a different experience than me and my older brother, we have learned to respect each other's kind of like viewpoint. Like you had this different parent, and that's not to bash on you. It's just you had a different experience than I did growing up.
Right.
But I think a lot of the
Mm.
times we come together as siblings for me in knowing like we have each other. And it's truly like a beautiful thing because there's so many of us, it's five. So
Yeah,
to know that we have each other, and although we may not agree on everything, that we try to show up for each other, we try to listen to each other. And it's not in like the typical, we have a therapist in the family way, like group therapy. It's like, pido la palabra, and like, I'm right. And like, we're
yes,
screaming over each other. But it's that energy of I have my siblings and my siblings want to hear me and we want to hear each other even when no vamos a salir bien todas las veces. But
right.
yeah, my resource and my support I think a lot of the times has been my siblings. And sometimes we'll say like mom and dad are trash. Like oh my god, I can't believe that they did this and that, and it'll
Just
feel
agreeing on it.
yes, it'll feel like they get it and I get it and it's just powerful. I wonder
Mhm.
for you, what's your resource moving forward?
So I also do rely a lot on my siblings, but also my best friend who also grew up in a Hispanic household and who had very similar experiences. Like she's the one I usually turn to be like, this is messed up, right? Like it's not just me. And so just having that validation from somebody and then hearing her struggles with her parents, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there's somebody who gets it.
Yeah, and I think that that breaks the silence of like guilt can keep us kind of quiet and hush hush about things. But once we do find that friend, that therapist, that those siblings who we can talk to, we don't feel as crazy. We feel like we can maybe build the courage to like set boundaries and to be okay with where we stand with our relationship with our parents. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad. So just so that y'all know, I think either one of us will be able to save it, I think, but
Mhm.
it'll be saved here. We might do clips of different things, but if not, then I'll make sure to post where it will be completely shared so that you can share and feel validated con más gente. So
Yes.
okay, Laura, thank you so much for being open to this. I really appreciate you taking my kind of inquiry
Yes.
seriously.
Thank you.
Y para la otra, we'll figure out what else our community needs and wants.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Okay, see you.
Bye.